The Los Angeles Dodgers last night once again made a big splash in free agency, signing Blake Snell to a huge 5-year, $182 million contract. And people are furious. So let's talk about it. Are teams like the Dodgers ruining baseball and pricing out the majority of teams in order to buy championships? So let's have a discussion. Obviously, the Dodgers are as good as it gets right now. They're coming off winning the World Series last year. In the roster, if you look at it on paper, how could you really compete with it? Again, we talked about in our video last night, if there was any concern about the Dodgers last season, it was their pitching. Of course, they signed Shohei Ohtani, but he wasn't going to pitch all of last year. Eventually, Tyler Glasnow went down. They saw River Ryan get hurt. Gavin Stone got hurt. Bobby Miller just wasn't as good as they expected. Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin were shelved. Clayton Kershaw missed most of the year. So heading into the postseason, they were really down to Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Walker Buehler, who was coming off his second elbow surgery and regular season certainly didn't look that good. Nothing near what we had seen before from Walker Buehler, and then Jack Flaherty, who they traded for at the deadline from Detroit. But now when you look at the Dodgers, guys like Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, Tyler Glasnow, those three all should be back next year. Clayton Kershaw's a free agent, but we know he wants to go back to LA. It's probably just going to be for smaller money. But then now they're also getting back a healthy Shohei Ohtani, Blake Snell. And when you look at it, you've got a lot of guys who have had injuries, right? Pretty much every pitcher on that Dodgers staff is coming off an injury or has had those problems in the past. And now they've set themselves up in a situation where they can really afford to kind of load manage some of these pitchers. They don't need Blake Snell to go out and throw 200 innings. That's always been one of the big knocks about Snell. He doesn't go that long into games. He works counts. He's going to walk some guys, although those metrics were improved last year. They don't need to get 200 innings out of him because they've got plenty of other capable pitchers. And how do you get that many pitchers? How do you get so much offensive firepower? By spending money. And that's where we get into this conversation. Are the Dodgers ruining baseball? Simply put, no, I don't think so. It's this big conversation that we've been having for years at this point, but I think it's reached a peak with the Dodgers these past 2 years. Going out and spending $700 million on Shohei Ohtani, then just a month after they spent $300 plus on Yoshinobu Yamamoto, they went and extended Tyler Glasnow. They brought in Teoscar Hernandez. It's like the Avengers forming, and nobody thought they could be beat, and they weren't. They had some hiccups throughout the regular season, but ultimately they held the Commissioner's Trophy, and they won the World Series. Now, when it comes down to this discussion, I don't agree with the side of every team can spend like the Dodgers. That is simply not true. Yes, you've got your New York Yankees, your New York Mets, a couple of teams that could be on that same plane of spending, but most teams it is unrealistic. The Dodgers, the Mets, the Yankees simply generate so much revenue that they can afford to have $300 million payrolls and go up against the luxury tax, which we'll talk about later. But just because a team can't spend like the Dodgers doesn't mean they can't spend more than what they are. Let's take a look at some numbers. Let's look at revenue. This is from 2023. We don't have the numbers from 2024 yet, but actually the Yankees rank it at number 1. They are even ahead of the Los Angeles Dodgers when it comes to revenue. And there's lots of things that factor into revenue. Again, as most people who are big proponents of the smaller market spending more money, every team gets revenue sharing. Essentially how it works, every team takes the revenue, let's say the New York Yankees, that's $679 million, 48% of that goes into a pool, and then you take 48% of the Dodgers revenue, the Cubs, the Red Sox, all 30 teams. All that money is put into a pool and distributed evenly throughout all 30 major league teams. So everybody gets the same amount of money from revenue sharing, but obviously the Yankees, the teams that make the most revenue are still coming out on top because you are getting teams that actually make more money in revenue sharing than they do themselves. Those franchises are characterized as payees as opposed to payers like the Yankees, who they're giving more in revenue sharing than they're actually pooling in, right? So that's a large amount of revenue that every team gets by that nature alone. Every team also is subjected to the national TV deal, which I believe is a bit shy of $100 million annually. That is, again, given to every single team. So you could probably go in and find the number of how much revenue sharing the Oakland A's are getting, for example, on top of, we'll just say, $100 million. And you can kind of guess how much money they're getting off the back of other MLB teams. And that's where a lot of people get frustrated that you've got franchises that are essentially sitting back, not making an effort, and mooching off the top. And that is definitely a problem. So once again, I'm not asking the bottom teams to spend like the top teams, but the given answers, they definitely could spend more. And you look at something like this, which I think these graphs are a little bit misleading towards people because there is obviously more to operating a baseball club than just your player salary, right? But once again, you see the 2023 revenue figures, and they show what percentage of that revenue they're spending on their players. You know, teams like the Mets are way up there at 87%. You'll see in a little bit. Obviously, the Mets are one of those teams operating at a loss right now. But you look at the teams at the very bottom, your Rays, who are a third of their player salary is what their revenue was in 2023, $300 million to $100 million. And that stuff is very interesting, especially when you look at the overall operating income, which is essentially, is your team profitable? Spoiler alert, every team is not profitable. You go to the bottom here, you look at the New York Mets like we talked about, they are significantly in the red. A lot of that is due to those big contracts, the Lindor, the Scherzer, the Verlander. Their attendance figures have been down opposed to expectations. Of course, the Mets did not make the playoffs in 2023. We'll see what that revenue figure is this year. They're done with those big contracts, Scherzer and Verlander, so they should be looking to get more into the green, but that goes to show what kind of ownership they've got with Steve Cohen. He is willing to shoulder the burden of operating the team at a loss in hopes that, they really rise up the ranks in terms of revenue, and it doesn't really matter. This is clearly a passion project for him. You also see teams like the San Diego Padres. They've made big signings. They spent lots of money. Their owner at the time, Peter Seidler, rest in peace, he was very aggressive once again, and I think now you've definitely noticed the Padres are trying to get back above that. They're trying to cut payroll, one of the big reasons why they traded Juan Soto. The Blue Jays are another team that is negative. The White Sox, the Colorado Rockies, and then the Oakland A's. So there's definitely something to be said. Not every team is profitable despite popular belief. Look at the White Sox. They're $28 million in the hole from last year. Obviously, they probably are going to be even worse off or close to this year. They've definitely shed salary, but I imagine their revenue is going to look pretty minuscule. But here on this chart, it says, well, they're only 44.8% of their 2024 payroll compared to their 2023 revenue. Well, there's a lot more to operating a baseball team than just the salary. Again, that's something to remember. But it gets really interesting when you look at the top here. You know, you've got teams like the Baltimore Orioles who operated nearly $100 million in the green in 2023. And again, that's referenced this chart because it's convenient. Their player salary mark is quite low. They're a very young team and a very good team. They're under new ownership. This is a team that has to spend, right? They're making so much profit. These are the teams that are definitely hurting the sport of baseball just as much, if you want to argue that the Dodgers are. Look at the Seattle Mariners. You know, I've got friends that are Seattle Mariner fans. I was out there last year at the All-Star game, and you've got a fan base who had went so long without reaching the postseason, and they've shown reluctance to spending money. They're $76 million above. $76 million of operating income. That is incredible. Hell, the Tampa Bay Rays, they're in an interesting spot. I don't want to single them out, but they're a notoriously cheap team. $68 million of operating income. That is incredible. The Pittsburgh Pirates with Bob Nutting. Again, one of those owners that people love to hate. And again, that seems to be for very clear reason. The Pirates make a lot of money. They just don't put that back into their players. And you're looking at so many owners that are just sitting back and pocketing this revenue. Yes, you want to profit. You want to make money. That's the reason you bought a team. But for these organizations to sit back and complain about teams spending money when you're profiting more than they are is ridiculous. The Mariners are making 3 times plus the money the Dodgers are. Obviously, the revenue for the Dodgers is much higher, but so is their cost, for their stadium, for their salary. It is incredible to sit back and look at these figures because you've got so many of the smaller market teams. Let's just go one by one. The Orioles, notoriously cheap. Mariners, notoriously penny pinching. The Rays, the Pirates, the Cubs and Red Sox. Those are big market teams that should be contending. They've got all the resources to do so. But you look at Boston, who sits back and is like, we're not sure if we're going to pay Mookie Betts. They trade him to the Dodgers, and you look at what's happened now. It is really something to actually look at all the figures here. And now, again, there is no salary cap. There's nothing preventing the big guys to keep spending and spending. Now, once again, there's no salary cap. Technically, these teams, the big markets, can spend as much as they want, but they still have to. And again, like we touched with the Dodgers, a big reason why they don't make that much money is because how much they're spending on players, but also the luxury tax. No, there's not a salary cap, a traditional sense of restricting teams from just buying championships, but they are penalized. Per the current collective bargaining agreement, the luxury tax threshold is set at $237 million, which, again, you look at these teams like the Rays, which profit over $60 million. They could spend $40 million, still profit 20, about the same as the Dodgers, and not be anywhere close to hitting the luxury tax. They have the competitive balance tax set in place to try and level a playing field and dissuade these teams from, fielding the highest God-given payrolls that you could ever imagine. And again, that's why the Mets are so far in the red. They have a tax bill of nearly $100 million, which is ridiculous, obviously. That's a lot of money that they're having to pay. But once again, those owners, the ones that are winning, again, you look at the Mets. No, they haven't made a World Series since 2015, and they haven't won since the 80s. But you look at the Dodgers, who just won, they're paying $88 million in luxury tax. And where were they in terms of profitability? They were, we don't have actual numbers here. It looks like they're probably below average. Yeah, I would say they're bottom half of teams in terms of profitability. It goes to show that the teams that are willing to sacrifice actual profit, they're the ones winning, and the teams that are sitting back and profiting on everything, they're the teams that are not. So I think when it comes down to it, that's as big of a problem as the Dodgers spending this kind of money. If anything, I like what the Dodgers are doing. Again, you're looking at a very rich ownership group, and they are profiting, but they're willing to sacrifice some of that profit in order to have one of the best teams. Is that not what you would love your ownership to do? You know, as a fan, all I care about is, does my team win? I don't really care about whether or not the ownership is profitable, how much money they're pooling in. I want to see my team win. But it's also within the interest of ownership to have their teams be good. Because if I'm happy, their pocketbooks are likely to be happy too. If you've got disgruntled fans, is it more likely that they're going to buy their son a jersey on Christmas Day? Is it more likely that they're going to go buy season tickets and attend more games? Of course, and all that leads to is more revenue, which is going to help them profit more. And truly, I have no doubt if teams like the Pirates, for example, decided that they were going to pony up, stop being so greedy, put more money into that team so they can be better, that is going to contribute to more ticket sales, more merchandise sales, more revenue, and ultimately probably a better future for Bob Nutting. The Pirates don't have to spend $280 million, but if you look at how much money they're profiting, what if they spent an extra $40 million on their payroll? You know, that's not going to get you every single superstar on the market, but that's going to help you flesh out your roster primarily filled with guys on, pre-arbitration or early arbitration contracts. Flesh it out with proven veterans, and those are often the teams that end up performing very well, getting into the postseason. Once you get into the postseason, you earn more revenue as well. There's a direct formula for this, but so many teams choose not to follow it, and then you see things like this happen. The Dodgers are building up this juggernaut because so many teams sit blindly by. Guys like Blake Snell, they're going to go to the teams that want to win. Of course, they're going to want to get paid their market value, what they're worth, but it's not as if just the Dodgers or the Yankees and Mets have the kind of money to pay these guys. And yes, places like New York and LA have more to offer in terms of marketing yourself as a player. But again, if you are a smaller market that is being so far in the green, why can't you, as a Baltimore Oriole, spend a little bit more money to get one of these guys who, a lot of these places you're also going to pay less in taxes as a player. There's no reason why they can't offer a competitive to even better offer than teams like the Dodgers, than teams like the Yankees. And a lot of people like to criticize the Dodgers' use of contract deferrals. Again, we saw that in Shohei Ohtani's contract, where the majority of it is going to be paid out after his time in LA is over. The Dodgers aren't the only one who can do contract deferrals. The option is open to any team or any player who wants to do that. Before Shohei, one of the most famous examples of a contract deferral in baseball was done by the Cincinnati Reds. Not exactly what you think of in terms of big markets. Ken Griffey Jr. signed a 9-year, $116.5 million contract in 2000. But you look, his AAV was around $7 million, $6 million. That's because the majority of it is deferred, and he had been getting $3.5 million for a long time coming. I mean, just now in 2024, is that contract finally through? All the deferred money for Ken Griffey Jr. is paid out. There's so much flexibility within contracts. If you don't want to do deferrals, if you've got money to pay right now on the front end, it's a big thing. A lot of players, you saw the Braves were able to ink Acuna, Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies. Those three alone. I think there was another guy in there as well. They got them because they're willing to pay this money early. And with Blake Snell, he's getting a $52 million signing bonus, which is going to help cheapen this deal in terms of the competitive balance tax. There's ways to work around this. Other GMs are doing it. It is not an exclusive thing that the Dodgers can only do. So bottom line is this. There's a lot of teams that could spend more money to field a better roster and still profit. You know, more than half the league could do that. And they could spend by like 20, 30, 40 million dollars more and still be plenty happy in the green, taking home big bucks. No, they probably can't spend like the Dodgers, but it's not only the Dodgers that are winning. Again, I think it's so easy to be blinded by 2024, where it's the Yankees and Dodgers in the World Series. But you look at the year prior, the Arizona Diamondbacks won the National League pennant. You know, they beat the Dodgers. They beat the Philadelphia Phillies. The year prior, Astros, Phillies. Now, Philadelphia was number 4 in terms of payroll. The Astros were number 9. They weren't even into the luxury tax penalties that year. 2021, Astros, Braves. Once again, Houston in there. They were number 7. Atlanta was number 13. You know, it's not just the number 1, the number 2, the number 3 teams in payroll that are making it to the Fall Classic. Yeah, the Dodgers have won twice in the last 5 years, but before that, they hadn't won since the 80s, like we talked about. It is not some guarantee, you know, some foregone conclusion that just because you spend the top money that you're going to win. You don't have to spend like the Dodgers. You don't have to have a $300 million payroll. Oftentimes, we've seen the blueprint. You've got young teams, and you go out and get veteran talent, and that is how you win. And that's where so many of these teams are right now. Look at the Cleveland Guardians. They were just in the ALCS this year. Very good team, shocked a lot of people. In 2023, they profited $52 million. Imagine if they spent $30 million more on that roster. What could they do? Get better starting pitching so they don't have to rely so heavy on that bullpen to where by the ALCS, they're used into the ground and they're tired. We know that happens to teams. We know what happens when bullpen arms have to work that long and that heavy. I don't love that every big free agent goes to the Dodgers. I think it is very boring that every free agency, you know, I'm a Twins fan, right? Yes, we signed Carlos Correa twice actually. It fell in our hands after the Mets. He didn't pass their physical. The Giants, he didn't pass their physical. And they got Nelson Cruz. They went and signed Josh Donaldson. Like, they have made some signings, but for the most part, fans like me and fans like 20 other teams, they don't really get to participate in free agency. They might get a decent player here and there, but they're not going to be in the market of some of these big name guys. And there's not really a great reason for that. Is every team realistically going to be able to sign Juan Soto? You know, probably not. You look at teams like the A's or the White Sox, they don't have high payrolls and they're not even profitable right now. It would make 0 sense for them to try and sign a Juan Soto or even like my Minnesota Twins. And I know a lot of teams are complicated with TV deals. You know, they had the whole Diamond Sports Group going bankrupt. the Twins, the Padres, the Diamondbacks, a handful of teams lost out on revenue that they would have gotten from their TV deal, and that's complicated things. But teams like the Twins, let's say they're $19 million in the green. Is it realistic that you could sign Juan Soto and still be profitable? Probably not. Would it help revenue a little bit? I think so. It would be very exciting for the fan base. You get merchandise sales. I think I would be more interested in buying tickets early, to guarantee that I can be there. But it's not like a saving grace. We signed this player. Not everybody is Shohei Ohtani, right? I mean, the Dodgers gave that amount of money to Ohtani partly because he's an excellent player, but also because he's such a draw, and you really saw that in 2024. So I'm not saying every team is able to sign Juan Soto, but you notice there's probably a lot more than 5 that realistically could get him or players like him. He's not the only free agent on the market. He's not the only big ticket one that would significantly improve a team's odds. There's so many options, but yet it's the same teams that are the ones that are in talks all the time. And it's the same teams that are always just content with doing the bare minimum and just kind of sticking with what they have. So we'll leave it at that. I'm tired of what the Dodgers are doing, but other teams are allowing them to do that. Other teams can offer deferred money. Other teams are profiting much more than the Dodgers, and other teams are contenders that these players would want to go to. So while I'm frustrated with Blake Snell and Ohtani and Yamamoto and Glasnow and Teoscar and Freddie Freeman and all these guys going to the Dodgers, if more teams actually tried and weren't so focused on how much we can profit right now, I think it would be far better for the long term for their franchise, and it would be a hell of a lot better for us as baseball fans. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. This is a lot of rambling that we did here today, but I had fun, and I'm interested to hear your guys' feedback. So we'll see if this is more of the norm for the rest of the offseason. Apparently, Juan Soto is still engaged with the Dodgers. They're not necessarily out just because they signed Blake Snell. We'll have to wait and see, but this is it for now.